Ladies and gentlemen, let's Gaming Center.com video. Great news for Nintendo fans. They have begun distributing software development kits for their new NX platforms. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. Additionally, Nintendo have replaced their rather old-looking Wario World, which is for developers and publishers, and instead created developer.nintendo.com/home, and this is going to be a rather powerful utility. For example, it will provide better tools for self-publishing, digitally publishing, as well as publishing for retail. They also have plans to implement advanced project tracking and ROM submission, project-based message boards, and also Nintendo are claiming that, as always, you'll have the best global developer support team ever right from the start, making the developer portal your go-to resource. Shifting away from the development portal and staying on the subject of specifications, what the actual hardware inside the machine will be is a mystery, to say the least. There is a hell of a lot of speculation, and we'll get into that in just a second, but I'll give you a quote from the Wall Street Journal. The exact shape of the NX hardware isn't yet clear. People familiar with development plans said Nintendo will likely include both a console and at least one mobile unit that could be used in conjunction with the console or taken on the road for separate use. They also said Nintendo would aim to put what they consider to be industry-leading chips in the NX devices after facing criticism that the Wii U's capabilities just didn't match their competitors, which, to be fair, it didn't. Now, the question is, what will be inside the machine, what will be the price point, and so on and so forth. Well, first of all, in terms of the price point, I think it will probably be around that of the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One at max, because I feel that consoles really have a somewhat inelastic demand in terms of people actually wanting the exclusives of that hardware, and obviously Nintendo do have a rather large fan base, but there is a maximum price that the average customer will also be willing to pay for a specific piece of hardware, particularly when there's a lot of competition already out. Now, personally speaking, I think there's actually a lot of information that's floating about, but of course it leads to speculation in regards to what the potential hardware could be. There are multiple different potentials. One would be x86, so that would be either like a PC or maybe like the PlayStation 4, Xbox One. Another potential would be an ARM-based processor, and potentially as well a Power PC derivative, which is what they've favoured for, let's say, the Wii U or even the GameCube. Now, there are some quotes which may possibly shed some light on this. Iwata said back in the day that if you transition of software from the platform to platform was made simpler, this will help solve the problem of game shortages and launch periods for new platforms. And this is in reference for porting 3DS games, to the Wii U. And they also went on to say that the only exception was when we went from the Nintendo GameCube to the Wii. Though the controller changed completely, the actual computer and graphics chips inside was developed very smoothly, as they were very similar to those in the GameCube, which we all know that basically the original Wii was pretty much an overclocked GameCube. Yes, there were a few architecture changes, but essentially the processors were just higher clocked. He also added, it will become important for us to accurately take advantage of what we have done with the Wii U architecture. It is, of course, not to say that we're going to use the same architecture as the Wii U, but we are going to create a system that can absorb the Wii U's architecture adequately. When this happens, home consoles and handheld devices will no longer be completely different, and they will become like brothers in a family of systems. There are a whole bunch of other quotes as well for this, and I'll try to remember to add it in the video's description. Honestly speaking, I think it won't be too long before we actually get some hardened details about what the system will have inside of it, and I'm going to give you some speculation in a moment, but I guess the big one is, when is this damn thing going to be released? Because let's face it, it's irrelevant of the hardware until we can play the damn thing, right? Because the system could have, more T-flops in it than, a treble SLI system, but at the end of the day, if you can't play it for 15 years, who cares? Well, It's a bit difficult to know judging from SDKs, because obviously the release of an SDK does not mean that a system is going to be released in, let's say, a year's time. It could be 3 years' time for all we know. If we were to use the Xbox One development kit, we see what's new popping up for March 2012. That's the Durango XDK. Now, assuming that was when the SDK for the Xbox One first started to be distributed for developers, which is probably around the date from what we understand, then it was about 18-ish months from the release of the SDK to when the actual Xbox One was released. But with that said, there was a hell of a lot of difference between Xbox One's architecture and the Xbox 360's architecture. So one can argue that also with the Xbox One, the release schedule just happened to coincide with the fact that Christmas was coming up, which is obviously a really good time for retail. So theoretically, yes, it's basically October. Let's just say let's say they actually released the damn thing in, let's say, September, late September, early October. Now we're hearing about reports, which is probably about what happened. So 18-ish months, which means theoretically it won't be released 2016. We could maybe see the system Christmas 2016, potentially. It's just too hard to know. However, the specifications are probably where most people are going to want to know, well, what most people are going to want to know at the moment, because let's face it, there was a hell of a lot of disappointment when it came to the Wii U. And I think it's fair to say, because the Wii U came out at a really weird time. It came out of this position where the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were basically old and crappy in terms of their hardware, and then it came kind of sandwiched in with these super consoles, the Xbox, well, super in comparison to the Wii U, of the, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and they just ruffle stomped over the hardware. And it wasn't like, I don't know, it was a third slower, just for the sake of argument. No. It was massively slower. And therefore that's led to problems with, people wanted to buy the damn console because they feel that it's massively inferior. So even if you do get a port from, let's say, an EO game to the system, you're like, well, gee, thanks for the, crappy graphics. Most people are not going to be that impressed. Therefore, from if you've got an Xbox 360, you're only interested in buying one console, you're probably not going to be that tempted to buy a Wii U if cross-platforms are your primary focus. Therefore, it's really the first-party games, which is a shame, but it just is what it is. Furthermore, from a cross-development perspective, in other words, releasing a game on the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, and so on and so forth, it's really difficult, because now we're at this position where even certain games for the Xbox 360 and PS3 had to be cancelled, for example Mortal Kombat, just because the old systems are incapable of running them. It just is what it is. They don't have fast enough GPUs, and all of enough memory, and all the other bits and pieces in the systems are just not capable of handling the next generation games, the next generation engines. It's unfortunate, but that is the life cycle of a console. So what about the hardware? Well, I did mention earlier that it could be an x86 derivative, it could be a processor like an ARM-based CPU, or, finally, it could be PowerPC. Each of them definitely has its advantages and disadvantages. From a cross-development perspective, releasing games across multiple systems, from the PlayStation 4, for example, to the NX, it definitely would be beneficial for Nintendo to go the x86 route, without any question. However, that's not to say that you couldn't do that, because let's face it, you can port code over if there's a particular reason to do so. In other words, you've got a good install base. However, with AMD at the moment releasing a couple of different processors, obviously we have the successor to the Jaguar. I won't bother to explain what that's about, because I think most people are aware of it. And AMD have also just recently finished, I guess you could say, work on a new processor known as the A57 ARM 64-bit, which is called I'm probably going to pronounce this incorrectly, Harry Falcon server SoC. So it's actually built primarily for servers. It has 8 processor cores on it, and it has a rather low TDP. It's around 30 watts, which is pretty damn low. It has PCIe Generation 3, and it is pretty damn high performance. It does support memory up to 1866 megahertz. That's DDR3 or DDR4, which is quite important because of obvious reasons. It can have a hell of a lot of RAM, 128 gigabytes per CPU, so the amount of memory, not a problem. Now, obviously, this is server-based. Right? The reason I emphasize that is because server is server. There are differences between that and what is potential, or what is possible, excuse me, for a console in terms of pricing. But I don't see a reason they couldn't release a cut down derivative of this for their system. And indeed, in terms of performance, a 1 core per clock with the Harry Falcon, whatever the hell it's called, as the nominal of 1.0, you could start seeing that in various performance benches that have been leaked. It's actually really competitive. It's actually faster, for example, than the Kabini. It's faster than, or at least kind of competitive to an i5. It's not faster than an i5, but it's certainly competitive, and it is faster or as competitive as Kavari. And the Kavari is clocked at a considerably higher clock speed, 3700 megahertz, excuse me, which, once again, this processor is not that much slower than that in various benches. For example, K-Pipe or Excel or Whetstone. That's pretty impressive, so it's definitely a potential. And obviously, in respect for ARM, it would also mean that it would be relatively easy to start porting games over to a mobile derivative. PowerPC, I'm going to guess, is probably slightly less likely. x86 is possible, though, because if you think about it, on the subject of Jaguar, just for the sake of argument, one of the primary purposes and uses of Jaguar was actually for tablets and other portable devices, and it does have quite a lot of oomph behind it. You have one Jaguar module with an updated GPU and all the other bits and pieces you need, and you could start making a fairly powerful system that's more than adequately capable of equipped rather, of playing pretty much anything, to be honest with you. I mean, within reason. So yeah, I mean, it would make a good successor for, say, the 3DS. Unfortunately, most of this is speculation at the moment, so I don't want to start doing a super in-depth technical analysis because we don't even roughly know what the architecture could be. PowerPC is another definite possibility, and it definitely has advantages over x86. It's a more tailor-made architecture, so therefore it is more powerful, and does have really good IPC. The problem with PowerPC is it's also less friendly to develop for, and I don't know, I'm probably less convinced they're going to go with PowerPC, but on the other hand, the fact that they've mentioned about compatibility with the Wii U is it's potential, but then again, it could just be one single processor inside the system. With all of that said, it's possible that the Wii U will just act or run on maybe a software-based emulator. You may scoff, but developers, or rather, I guess you could say, there's an actual project at the moment with a group of individuals. I've forgotten the project's name offhand, but they're working on a Wii U emulator as well. At the moment, it's super duper early, but that's software-based. However, I imagine it's going to require the final system specifications are probably going to be fairly beefy, so whether Nintendo are going to be able to do that or not, it's a bit unknown. It's all a little exciting. Personally, I'm hoping for a pretty kick-ass system from Nintendo. I'm hoping that the system's going to be at least as powerful as the PlayStation 4/Xbox One, because if it's not released until, let's say, for the sake of argument, it's released, let's say, 14 months from now, so basically around the time for Christmas next year, I think people would be rather upset if it's not at least as powerful as the Xbox One. I really do, because people are going to say, hey, this is ridiculous, the thing's been released like just over 3 years after the Xbox One, so we want something at least as powerful. Because I just think that that's kind of what people's mentality is now. Particularly now as we're moving towards ridiculously high resolution TVs, like 4Ks by that point will be even cheaper. So I feel that at the very least, an Xbox One, a system at least as powerful as the Xbox One or PlayStation 4 would be kind of on the cards. But once again, I'm not Nintendo. I don't know what they're doing behind closed doors. Let me know what you want though. What would you want in the Nintendo system? I mean, apart from a decent lineup of games, obviously that's the most important thing. Let's face it, if the system has great games, you're going to be more happy to deal with a subpar architecture if the games are really good. On the other hand, what would you want in terms of hardware? Would you prefer the more traditional controller, for example? I personally would. I think they did some good experiments with the Wii and the Wii U, but I think at this point Nintendo need to go back to kind of old school. That's my own personal opinion. Potentially it would be great if they could possibly get on the VR train, but I don't know if they would go that route. I just don't know. Maybe. Potentially. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.